Hello, everybody. It's been a while since I've recorded content for my podcast, which also ends up filtering to Liftable TV. This is me coming back, and I'll explain where I've been here in a minute. But it's good to see you. I'm glad that you're joining me. I usually have a guest, but I thought that it would be good for me to kind of bring you up to speed to where I've been in the last month and then kind of give you an indication of where I'm going moving forward. So in July, I believe it was July the 10th, I flew to Iowa, Muscatine, Iowa, to speak to a group of kids at a camp. The camp was, the first week was junior high kids, and it was around 100 kids that week. And then the second week was high school kids, and it was about 70, 75 kids, I believe, for that camp. And so the first week went great, had a great time. The second week I had a great time also, but somewhere in the first few days of that camp, I contracted COVID. And so I started exhibiting the symptoms somewhere in that week. And then I was supposed to fly home on I believe it was Saturday. I had the Friday off. The camp ended on Thursday night. But I wanted to make sure that the symptoms that I had were indeed COVID. I wanted to make sure that wasn't what it was. And it was. And so I had to stay in quarantine at the camp for 10 days. That's what they asked. And so those first few days were really rough mentally because I was a long way from home. I live in California, Northern California. And I was all the way in the middle of the country in Iowa, and then I had to isolate by myself. And so mentally, it was a big challenge, and it was a struggle right away. So I tried to quarantine. I ended up going to the emergency room a couple of times just to get help because I was having trouble breathing, I thought. And so first of all, the first time I went to the emergency room, they put me on fluids because I was dehydrated, and then they gave me Tylenol to combat the fever, and then they let me go to kind of manage those things on my own with ibuprofen and Tylenol. And so those next few nights were really tough because I'm really, really sensitive to medication, and I would break out in hives in the middle of the night, and then I didn't want to take the meds to bring the fever down. And so it's just this delicate dance back and forth trying to manage that and the stress of that. And then they gave me this little monitor on my finger to monitor my oxygen level, and if it went down to a certain level, I was supposed to come back in. So that happened within the first couple of days after I went to the emergency room. And I went back to the emergency room, and then they said, no, everything looks good. Your numbers are great. Your fever is in control. You're on your way. Just keep going. Lots of fluids. Take the meds, and you'll be okay. So I did that for a few days, and then I was supposed to leave. I believe it was on a Friday of that week. And the day before, I was going to go get an infusion of vitamins and stuff like that at this fancy doctor's office. So I get there, and the woman that was supposed to give me the treatment takes one look at me and says, something's not right. You don't look right. Your breathing's not good. And they put the little thing on my finger for my oxygen, and like, this is really low. I don't know how you feel about this, but I'm calling an ambulance right now because you don't look right. This isn't, something just doesn't seem right. So she calls the ambulance. They get there. They take me to the emergency room, and I get admitted into the ICU. And then I had COVID pneumonia, and so they were going to keep me there. And then they just asked that I would let them treat the COVID and that they were confident that they could get it under control. And so um, I was kind of lethargic and just kind of didn't put up a fight and just like, okay, whatever. Mentally, all throughout that, I was really, really battling a lot of negativity and a lot of the idea that maybe I would be one of the ones that didn't make it out of this. Maybe I wouldn't see my family ever again. And just, it was just ongoing, just nonstop, like day and night. And then, especially after battling these thoughts throughout my quarantine by myself, and then I end up in the back of an ambulance for the first time, and then I'm on my way to the hospital. It was only like a mile and a half away, but it felt like it was miles. It was long, and I get there, and then they admit me, and so then I'm just there alone with my thoughts in the room, hooked up to all of the wires and all of the different things to monitor my condition. And it was a very big struggle with fear that no matter what they were telling me, that things were going to get worse. I look back on it now, and I never got any negative news. After I got to the ICU, all of my reports from every doctor and nurse was positive. Now I look back on that and I understand how significant that was and how great that was. But I tell you, I could not process the positive news. I was always waiting for the bottom to drop out. I was always waiting for them to come in and say, oh no, this is not going well. This is going the wrong direction. We don't know. I had a hard time thinking anything other than it was going to keep going the wrong direction. And so day after day, I was there for 6 days. Finally, my wife, as soon as I was admitted to the ICU, my wife booked a flight and left my kids. I have 3 younger kids. They're 9, 6, and 3, and left them with my in-laws. Thankfully, they live there in town and they are set up to where they can take care of them. And so she got on a plane and was on her way to me. And so by the time she got to me, thankfully, I was taken out of the ICU and put into a regular room because I was progressing the right way, even though mentally I couldn't really accept that things were getting better. I was getting better. So I was recovering physically, not mentally, but physically. Things were going the right direction. My wife gets there, and then for the next several days, there's certain visiting hours when she can come and she can see me. And then she hangs out with me for as long as the nurses will let her. Most nights it was until both of us were ready to go to sleep, which was pretty late. We wanted to spend as much time as we could together. And so, but every day in the morning, the doctor would come and visit me at 8 in the morning, and he would say, you're doing better. You're doing good. The meds are working. They had me on steroids to fight the COVID and to get my restoration of my lungs. Both lungs were in jeopardy. And so day after day for 5 days, things got better. They were putting me on less and less oxygen to assist me breathing. It was getting better and better every day. And then by the 6th day, they released me. And it like shocked me that I was getting released because, again, mentally, I had some kind of a brain fog going on. And I don't know how much of it was just fear brought on by me. I don't know if it was the meds or just the COVID itself. I mean, I've heard other people talk about how they struggled mentally during their quarantine and things like that. So some combination of all of that. I don't know what the combination was, but mentally the battle was raging against me. And I honestly wasn't winning that battle. I struggled. And I don't know that I was necessarily thinking things were going to be bad or get worse, but I was just lethargic. I just didn't put up a fight. There were family and friends all over praying, and I've heard people say they prayed for me more than they ever have. And so there were people storming heaven's gates on my behalf, but I was somewhere in the middle of pride and surrender. Pride meaning like, oh, there's no problem. I'm going to kick this thing. No problem. No, you're no match for me, devil. And all of that stuff where you can be in pride by in your own strength, thinking that you can somehow conjure up, pull up your bootstraps and just push through and you can do it. Somewhere between where that place is unhealthy and the place where you're just defeated. There, I was in the middle somewhere. And I wouldn't necessarily say surrender is defeated, but where is that line where you just accept that God, you're in charge, you're in control? Some people make it through this and some people don't. And I can honestly say that I believed that God was still good no matter what he did for me. He didn't need to pull me through this situation to prove that he was good. I was resolute that he was good no matter what. Even if my time was up and it was time for me to go to be with him, he's good. So I didn't struggle with that. There was never any question of, there was never the screaming, shaking my fist at heaven, why God, why me, why do I have to go through this? It's not fair. None of that. God is good, but the problems that I had were within me. I believe terrible things about myself, even though I tell people all the time not to do that. But I made it up in my mind that I deserved the bad outcome, that I'm Black, I'm 49, older, and that I have type 2 diabetes and high blood pressure. I mean, I can't blame myself for being Black or how old I am, but I definitely accepted the blame for being vulnerable, meaning that I earned type 2 diabetes, I earned high blood pressure. Those were my actions that brought those on, that made me, in my mind, vulnerable and weak to where my body wouldn't fight. But the truth was my body did fight. I can't take any credit for it, but the truth is my body did incredibly well. Now that I know what a lot of people go through when they get COVID pneumonia and things just keep going the worst way direction, bad, 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 and sometimes it's the end. That never happened for me. There's only positive news once I got to the ICU. I never had any report from any doctor or nurse that things were going the wrong way or going bad. It never happened. But despite hearing those positive reports every day, there was something in me that after I felt, okay, I need to address this. Why, as a Christian, as a preacher, as a leader, somebody that knows better, what is the problem? Why, what was the disconnect? Why did I not fight more for myself? Why did I just accept whatever was going to happen? You know, and I'm not saying I have all the answers. I don't. And that's part of the reason why for the next several months, the emphasis of my ministry or ministries will be fighting fear, facing fear. And so it's not just my story right now. Obviously, in the last 2 years in particular, the world has been turned upside down and it's brought on lots of fears. And we've all had to face a measure of it. Some more dramatic than others, but we've all had to face change and upheaval and thinking this thing might be over and then it's not over. And then we think again that it's over and then it's not over again. Just on and on. So there's lots of fear that's come with that. And I don't think that I'm the only one when faced with disaster, hard times, insurmountable pain, or situations where there's nothing that you can do to fix it. There's nothing you can do with your smarts or resources to turn the situation around. You're just kind of at the mercy of the situation. And I believe God A lot of us have been there. And so I want to dig in and talk about that. I'm going to do a tour where I go to churches, youth groups, men's groups, women's groups, whoever will have me, and share my story and my journey and my realization that even as a Christian that has walked with God all of my life, that there's still a level of fear that I have not faced and dealt with. And I believe that the truth and the answer is in the Word of God, and that I need to dig in more and make that more, hide that more in my heart than I have. But I want to talk to people about that. I want to share. And then in this format, on this podcast, I want to talk to people, various walks of life, and hear their story. And it's always interesting to hear people's stories and what they've come through or what they've accomplished. And so most of the time, this podcast is about people that inspire me. And the thought is, if they inspire me, I think they'll inspire you. So there will still be a measure of that, but there will be an emphasis on those type of people and how they've faced their fears throughout life. Maybe in the past, maybe right now. But to hear how they face it with hopes of defeating it someday. So this might be a little bit shorter than normal, but I thought that I needed to, at first, kind of bring you up to speed as to where I've been and hear a little bit about where I'm at and where I'm going. And I'm glad for any of you that have listened this far. And I'm hopeful that you will join as I put out more content and get back into that. Whether you're on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or Liftable TV, and any of the different formats, or just a podcast that you listen to. I really appreciate you listening, and I hope that I will have something to say, or somebody that I'm talking to will inspire you and make your journey a little bit better and easier. So thanks again for listening, and we'll talk to you again real soon.